I've been working in Asia Pacific for over 11 years and with employer branding for over 13 years. For those who know me, you will know that this is really my true passion. Today's session is the second in our three-part emerging market series. As many of you know, the first part took a look at emerging markets in Latin America. For anybody who's interested in Latin America, we'd be happy to share the video of that session. The final part of the series looks at Africa and will be held on October 14th. So there is still time to register if you're interested in that one as well. Today, the spotlight, of course, will be on Asia Pacific. This session will be recorded and link will be sent to you after the session. There will be time at the end for questions. And of course, you can also include questions in the chat. And my colleague Mike Parson or I will try to get through them all during the session. Or alternatively, you can share them in the chat and we will respond to you via mail after the webinar. So, okay, without further ado, let's get going. So obviously, we all know that Asia is a core region for talent right now. But particularly the focus today is on the emerging markets. The Talent Insight series in particular looks to uncover what university students are looking for in future employers and how companies can translate these findings into actionable steps for HR, for recruiting, and C-level leadership. The Talent Insight series is based on our research. So here we'll be looking at 2,200 educational institutions in 55 countries, and we surveyed about 1.3 million respondents. Of course, when it comes to emerging market, there's a slightly different focus. It is widely believed that emerging market economies will be the engine that drives global growth in the 21st century and beyond. So it's really not hard to see why all eyes are on the next generation of leaders are from these regions. Some stats here: by 2016, the GDP growth in emerging markets and developing economies will increase to 4.7%. Which of course is largely on the projected improvement in economic conditions in a number of distressed economies. The emerging market economies will grow almost 3 times faster than developed ones, accounting for an average of 65% of global economic growth to 2020. And then emerging markets are also experiencing strong population growth. So on the whole, of course, these regions are very young and full of potential for employers looking to hire new talents. If we look at the median age in emerging market, it is 28.4 years compared to 40.9 in developed economies. So much, much younger talent. And of course, a big percentage of it is the millennials, which we will talk a little bit more in a second. Which markets in APAC will we be looking at for this Talent Insight series? Well, Universum, of course, defines an emerging market as a country that has a rate of GDP growth higher than the global average. But those markets are also not as mature as those in countries with developed economies such as US, UK, for example, or Western Europe. Today, we will be focusing in particular on India, on Malaysia, on Indonesia, on Vietnam, and on Thailand. We will also have a separate webinar for China since it is such a complex market. We won't be able to include it here, but we will look at it again in a future webinar. The top themes to know about regarding APAC this year, some of the key trends that we've been seeing and that I've been presenting across the region is, of course, Asia being the key source of future talent globally. There is a large pool of young talent in APAC, though it's limited by emerging market characteristics. So as many of you know, up to a few years ago, the idea is that you could come to Asia in markets like India and hire very qualified talent for very little cost. But now that's no longer the case. And also, the type of talent that companies are looking for that is likely to be successful in today's global environment is not that readily available. The talent pool is quite diverse, both within APAC and within the individual countries. So of course, I hate talking about APAC because APAC is made up of countries that have very different realities. And when we look at the talent pipeline in these markets, we see very big differences from one market to the other. So a localized approach is extremely critical. Work-life balance is an important career goal in emerging markets. This wasn't the case a few years ago, but of course, with the rise of the millennials, now we see that work-life balance has caught up, same as in emerged economies, as one of the most important if not the most important career goal for talent today. However, we see that career goals differ a lot between emerging markets, especially within Asia Pacific. So we will look at what those career goals are. Millennials in Asia Pacific are some of the most optimistic of any region, and I will go into a little bit more detail about that in a minute. In Asia Pacific, environmental employment factors are more important than a good reputation or market success. And this is something that caught a lot of companies off guard. Up to a few years ago, it was enough to be a multinational, for example, or be a strong brand and promote good opportunities with high salaries or good opportunity to make money in the future. And that would be enough to attract talent. And now, as we have seen with a kind of decline of financial services and banks across the region, that is no longer as attractive as it used to be. In many cases, of course, this is causing a shift in employer preferences from international to domestic employers. So many students now and talent in general see foreign companies much more cutthroat and careers with these organizations, a lot less stable and significantly more challenging than working with domestic employers. Those from emerging markets are also among the most keen in having an international career, although they're also the most likely to return home. And this is something that I know a lot of organizations struggle with, is how do we attract these kind of overseas talents, these sea turtles who go abroad, and how do we make sure they come back? And very often the perception is that these individuals do not want to come back. However, what we do find is that they are quite interested in going back to their home markets. And in general, they just don't feel they have enough access to opportunities back home. So that, of course, warrants a whole new different approach on the part of companies to bring them back, including, of course, the development of a return value proposition, right? Clearly stating what's in it for them if they decide to return to their home market as opposed to pursuing a career abroad. Social media is highly important in APAC, both on a personal and professional level, but talent also craves direct personal contact. So, many organizations feel that social media is perhaps not the way to go in emerging markets. What you will see in the data I will show you in a second is actually talent in emerging markets in Asia is much more likely to engage with employers through social media than even in developed markets. So let's go through each of these kind of challenges one by one. APAC is a key source of future talent globally. We have run a study with Fortune 500 companies asking them what is the region around the world where they experience the largest recruitment growth, but also the one that they find to be the most challenging. And as you can see here, Asia Pacific is both the one where they're expecting the largest growth, but also the one where they feel they're going to have the biggest challenges. And challenges in particular relate to increasing difficulty to recruit talent across APAC countries. There's high demand for skilled labor, experienced professional managers, but also, soft skills. The quality of candidates is still a challenge. So majority of educational institutions still are poor quality, or they don't teach all those skills that multinationals and companies in general are looking for in talent. And then it's going to make talent successful in this global environment. We're talking specifically about soft skills, business acumen, emotional skills, ability to think outside the box, cultural agility, ability to culturally integrate, these kind of things. Multinational companies are now losing ground to national champions. As I said, in the past, it was enough to be an MNC and talent would be kind of, knocking on your door. But now we see that there is a counter trend and domestic employers are more attractive. Monetary reward and future career opportunities are no longer the main driver of employer selection. So students don't value and talent in general money as much as it was before. It's becoming more and more of a hygiene factor where talent is looking much more for the kind of cultural experience and environment within a company than just sheer money. Retention continues to be a persistent problem. So we see that HR is working hard to kind of fill all those positions, but only half of the kind of recruitment efforts are growth driven. The rest is just to kind of fill in the shoes of people that are leaving. And this is even higher in the emerging markets that we will be focusing on today. So of course, all of this requires for HR to think about employer branding and talent strategy in a much more kind of forward thinking way, as opposed to operationally. And of course, one of the biggest challenges that Asia is facing right now is the arrival of the millennials. And as many of you know, I've been running workshops with organizations and line managers and executives to make sure that they understand how this generation is different and how they need to kind of treatment and manage them and mentor them in order to ensure that retention. But this is really a big challenge in Asia right now, particularly because generations occur at different points in time across different regions. So while in the United States, for example, millennials entered the job force in 2000 and really created the biggest impact around 2005, we see that in Asia, they have entered the job force in around 2008. And the bulk of the challenge, they're really kind of rising up within companies today. So this, of course, is creating a big trouble on the talent market because especially within organizations that are run by baby boomers or Gen Xers, because millennials have complete different priority, preferences, ideas of what they want, way to look at their ideal companies than ever before. That is a whole different topic. As you know, I've been running a lot of millennial webinars, but a couple of quick things just to as a reminder. 50% of them would rather have no job than a job they hate. This is very different than the perspective or perception of a job that many students and professionals had for many years. Which is to be lucky to have a job, something to hang on to be thankful for. 80% say that the work environment is much more important than the size of their paycheck. So many organizations have really been promoting and positioning themselves based on the strength of their industry, while in reality, what they're looking for is, the work environment, the experience, right? The experience with their managers, with their peers. 87% say their ability to learn and grow is essential to their job. And this is another challenge companies face. You bring in entry-level talent, you put them on some fast track to learn a lot in the first year or two, but then what happens when the real work starts? A lot of these people actually feel like they're stalling, and the only way to continue in their career and progress is to move to your competitors. 80% think they deserve more recognition than they get, and this is really one of the key reasons for attrition. Millennials feel that the managers don't understand them and they don't give them enough recognition, which is why, as I mentioned, many companies are now asking me to come in and actually have these sessions on millennials with line managers, with people who will be managing millennials before perhaps the internship starts, so that they are aware of what to look out for and are more likely to be able to provide what this generation needs. 75% are not completely satisfied with their jobs because, of course, 90% of them think they deserve the dream job. This is something that was embedded with them by their parents, who are often the ones who then have challenges working with them in the workplace. And then 33% choose recognition over higher pay, and this is even higher in emerging markets. So again, this is a whole new topic, but I think it just helps put into context how different the world is today as opposed to just a few years ago in this part of the world, and how important it is that companies really understand what talent is saying. And what they're looking for and what their perception is, so that they can go out and communicate things that are relevant. Then, of course, as I mentioned, there is a large pool of young talent in APAC, though it's limited by emerging market characteristics. So what are some of those characteristics? As you can see, Asia Pacific accounts for more than half of the world's population. As you can see, 62% of the world's population is in APAC. So it's not surprising that companies, businesses are moving more and more to this side of the world. APAC's population is also much younger than Europe's and North America's and has the most people entering the workforce. So if you can see here, demographic of the world population as of 2013, you will see that Asia has a lot more a higher percentage of population that is within 15 and 44 years of age, and age 0 to 14. So age 0 to 14 will be your Gen Z. This is another generation that companies are looking at, very, very carefully nowadays. And we actually are about to launch the first global ever Gen Z study. We surveyed over 60,000 Generation Z students across the world and in Asia Pacific, and we will be releasing that report in a couple of weeks. So for all those organizations that really want to catch and understand talent in the bud, that is something that could be interesting to you. So let me know if so. But 48%, as you can see, is a really high number, and a big percentage of these are millennials. So as I mentioned, millennials are roaring in Asia, even more so than they are in the rest of the world. Which is part of the reason why many of these countries are net exporters of talent. So we do see, for example, that talent leaving emerging markets in Asia to pursue an education or a career abroad is a very strong reality. we see more and more individuals kind of emigrating out of Asia and into markets like the US, the UK, Australia to pursue careers. However, what has been happening is in the past few years, this trend is actually declining. We see fewer people actually wanting to go abroad, and actually even more people wanting to come back. And I think this is, very strongly related to the fact that talent in Asia finally sees the strong impact, and the strong focus on Asia. And they have a very strong sense of national pride. I mean, they're a part of something big now. They want to be kind of involved and responsible for the growth of Asia as a region. So even when they do go abroad, their interest is becoming more and more that to acquire all those skills needed to be successful, and then bring those skills back to the home market to really support organizations or start their own company, as we also see a growing percentage of entrepreneurs in the region. In addition, of course, educational attainment in these markets tends to be fairly low, compounding any scarcity of local talent available. So, we see that more and more individuals, of course, are moving abroad because they feel that if they stay within the home market, they won't be able to gain all those skills that they need, just because the education, the universities are not up to speed. And also on top of that, you see that there are a quite significant number of individuals within each market who actually are not enrolling in university at all. So of course, although you have a very young and broad population, the number of individuals who are pursuing, tertiary education, who do have all those skills that you're looking for, who are likely to select your company as an ideal employer and be a good fit for your organization, of course, are shrinking and shrinking. So, the war for talent, or the battle to get this talent to join your organization, is even tougher now than it was before. Talent pool in APAC is quite diverse, both regionally and individual countries. As mentioned, I've been, working with companies in Asia Pacific for almost 11 years, and I work with global teams, I work with regional teams, I work with local teams, I work with functional teams, and I really hate the APAC generalization because, it is such a diverse and complex market where every single market exhibits unique characteristics. So if you think about millennials, for example, as a tree, right, that's stemmed in the West. And then you think about all these millennials as seeds that are kind of floating eastwards. The way in which these seeds actually grow into trees is very much dependent on the type of soil that they grow up in, right? So the reality in a market like Vietnam is very, very different than even the reality in Thailand, than the reality in India, than the reality in Malaysia, in Singapore, and so on and so forth. So it becomes so important for companies not to generalize. And although it is true that there are general trends that are consistent with millennials across the world, there are very unique characteristics exhibited by millennials across each of the different markets in Asia. So it is important for companies to really focus on that. So one of the biggest, of course, differences in Asia, I mean, just look at the languages. There are about 7,100 living languages in the world, of which Asia has more than any other region. So if you look at Asia, there's 2,301 living languages, as opposed to, even 2,138 in Africa. In the Pacific, it's only 1,313, and in Europe, there's only 286. So I mean, this in itself is huge reason to and also from this stem all the other differences across the market. So this really requires an extremely sustainable and localized EVP on the part of companies to recruit talent. All these markets, of course, vary in size and GDP, and therefore in the relative wealth of their citizens. So if you can see it, there's a disconnect between the GDP of these markets and the GDP per capita. So you see that while, for example, India accounts very strongly for global GDP in US dollars, in reality, the GDP per capita is still relatively low. So, of course, this is also something that is important and that should be kept into account. Even with individual country, of course, the quality of talent often heavily depends on factors like location or education. So in India, for example, the talent market is not even evenly spread across the country. And India is a fairly mature market in regards to talent. I was actually managing India for 3 years in 2006. And this is really where all of the multinationals thought that they could come to India and snatch, the best of the best engineers for almost, no cost. And in reality, that was not the truth. I mean, India is very, very complex in and of its own, just because of the way that universities work, and employers positioning themselves with students on campus works. But even if you look at India across the country, forgetting, the different levels of educational institutions, or, the different kind of the maturity of different regions or cities within India, if you look, for example, at the two top universities in India, you can see that even there are very significant differences in terms of what the target group wants. So if you look at students in IICS and IIT, you can see that they don't even share the same career goals. When normally would expect that, since these are two very, very strong institutions within the same market, students would be fairly similar. You can see that that is not the case. In fact, you can see that, for example, in an ICS in Bangalore, being competitively or intellectually challenged is significantly more important to students than in IIT in Delhi. While on the other hand, students in Delhi seem to be much more keen on really being dedicated to a cause or serve the greater good than students in IICS. So again, this really shows, and I've been having, separate webinars and workshops with companies on the importance of localization. But localization is not only about geography, it's also about, not geography in terms of, different markets, but also different regions within the markets. Think China, think Guangdong province versus Shanghai or Beijing, but also in terms of universities, in terms of functions, whether you look at business or engineering students, that's going to make a very significant difference. And you can't win the war for talent. You can't go out and communicate what's attractive to your target group if you don't know, A, what your target group is really looking to hear, and B, what they're already associating or not associating with you. And then you can see again that in the other hand, they're quite aligned, for example, with wanting an international career. This is something that is actually quite consistent across India, and I will touch upon it a little bit in a few slides. Then the big topic of work-life balance, the topic that causes a lot of trouble for many companies. Whenever Google came, about and started talking about work-life balance and game rooms and massages and bringing pets to work, companies started panicking, particularly financial services and professional services companies, because they just didn't understand how they would ever be able to compete with a Google, how they would ever be able to position work-life balance in quite the same way, since obviously the industry was relatively different. Well, there's good news for those organizations. Although work-life balance is an important career goal, we see that the way in which it's defined in each country is different. And also, it is different in the way it is defined by students interested in different industries. So if a student chooses a career in investment bank, of course, he can't possibly be expecting the same level of flexibility as he would have at Google. Yet that doesn't stop him from choosing a career in investment bank, and also it doesn't stop him or her from choosing work-life balance as top career goal. So what this tells us, and I will show you some data on this in a second, is work-life balance is not just about flexibility or working less hours or being able to integrate personal interests in the schedule, but it's also about respect for the people, about feeling home at work, about feeling secure that your manager is there to support you. So you don't feel like you have to be constantly on your tippy toes at work, because if you show your true self, you may get fired or you may lose your job or your position or your manager's respect. Is about feeling that you can be yourself, and that you can have this kind of gigantic hobby that you go to every day, that you invest time and resources and energy in, but that is not significantly different than who you are in your private life. But when it comes to career goals specifically, students across all emerging markets globally are still focused on work-life balance. So this data is specific to all emerging markets across the globe. And you can see that when we look at their top 3 career goals, having work-life balance is by far the number one, selected by over 40%, 47% of students. Being entrepreneurial or creative and innovative is number 2. And this is an interesting one because if you look at Asia Pacific in particular, especially markets like China or Singapore, for example, I mean, these are markets that were built. The whole strength of their economy was built on the idea of having a workforce of highly functional and technical experts that would be able to perform certain duties perfectly and therefore kind of support and fulfill the needs of multinational organizations. Well, that is no longer the case. Even in these markets, becoming a technical or functional expert is becoming one of the least attractive career goals now, when it was the most important just a few years ago, replaced by being entrepreneurial, the opposite, right? Thinking outside the box, working on things that matter, changing things, being innovative. And then, of course, the concept of security and stability, which is not only related to whether your industry is stable, to whether your company has had redundancy or let go of employees, but it's primarily related to how they feel with their manager. Is my manager there to audit me, to get me, to catch me with my hand in the cookie jar? Or is he there to actually support me, help me grow, understand that in order to learn how to walk and run, I will need to fall, and he's going to be there to support me through that process. This is very important for students nowadays, especially in this part of the world. How does this career goal stack up in Asia Pacific? So if we look at Malaysia, we can compare it with Chile on the other side of the world. The desire for work-life balance here is the highest among all emerging markets we surveyed globally. However, with the rest of Asia Pacific emerging markets surveyed, you can see that this career goals comes in below the regional average. So, here we say that this shows that these emerging markets, the desire for work-life balance is less than those more developed markets in Asia. But here is where I kind of agree and disagree. And the reason for that is the following. Up to a few years ago, right? Nobody, I am sure many of you on this call, those who are like me, Gen Xers or baby boomers, you would have never thought about, going out and seeking a company based on the work-life balance that you would have, or how friendly your boss would be, or how likely you would be to be able to kind of pursue your passions on the side, right? Work was something that you had to really mold into, that you were lucky to have. You would choose a company based on the industry, based on the brand, based on the money. But, it would never occur to us to think, oh, well, I want to join a company only if my boss is going to be friendly and supportive. Because we didn't think we could ask that, right? And now, of course, the reality in the workplace is very different. So now students are starting to realize, talent is starting to realize that work is about so much more than money. So, of course, the second they realize that work is about so much more than money, and the moment that companies start positioning themselves to this talent by saying, hey, it's no longer about just working hard, hating your job, and being at it because you need to support your family. You should actually be able to love your job. You can choose a company that has values that meet yours. You can choose a company where you feel you can be dedicated to a cause. You can work for a company where you have work-life balance, where you don't have to miss your kids' first steps, or where you don't have to miss your wife if she's traveling, because you can work from anywhere, right? So the second that students or talent starts to realize that this is a reality, of course, this is going to become a top priority. So Malaysia, out of all the emerging markets, is the most emerged, is the most mature. And so, of course, work-life balance has taken a foothold. They now understand that money is a hygiene factor, and work-life balance now is a top career goal. In markets like Vietnam or Thailand, just up to a few years ago, there weren't that many opportunities in the market. This market is just opening up. And parents of these kids, probably, raise them to believe that they would be thankful to have a good job, and they should go after a company that would provide them with that stability. So, of course, the idea of becoming a leader, for example, is still more important than the idea of work-life balance. But very, very soon, and we've seen this in Indonesia just in a year, they will start to realize that companies are not planning to leave Vietnam or Thailand, that the opportunities will just keep growing. And so just as we have seen in emerged economies, many of the nice to haves will now become must haves, which means that work-life balance will become increasingly more important. So what does work-life balance actually mean in Asia Pacific? So when we ask millennials how they define work-life balance, yes, enough leisure time for my private life, it's very important. Keeping in mind these are also kids that very often grew up with divorced parents, because perhaps dad wasn't around enough, he wasn't present enough, there were not enough time, for family vacations, for family endeavors. So of course the idea that, hey, we have, this life, and I want to be able to enjoy it and spend it with people that I love, is a top priority. But actually, look at number 2. It's about recognition and respect for employees. This is very interesting. I don't think many organizations or many people would actually associate that with work-life balance. But the reality is that if students can be themselves, If they can come to work every day and be working with friendly people, with a boss that supports them, that mentors them, very much like their parents do, then, you know, then really work is no different than something like one more activity that they do, that they invest their energy in, that they love, right? It's like having a big hobby. We always say, used to say back in my day that, people who actually are born loving their job, or, or learn early on what they love to do and can do it, are lucky because it's one big hobby. Well, that is the same way talent is thinking about companies nowadays. If I find a company that matches my values, that respects me, that makes me feel great, where actually I enjoy the work that I do, I'm bound to have good days and bad days, just like I have good days and bad days maybe with my spouse or my parents or my kids or my friends. But all in all, it's not something I would change. It's part of who I am, right? So I think this is very important. And in order for companies to accomplish this and communicate this, they really need to communicate the people and culture. They really need to bring external stories out. A day in the life of a student who graduated from the university, who now works for your organization, and how, maybe intimidated he was to join the work environment, but how supportive your teams were and how supportive the managers were. These kind of things. Also, they shouldn't have to fear, being excited of their upcoming vacation. When I was going, when I got out of school, I remember I was told by career services not to ask companies how many vacation days I would get if I was getting interviewed, right? Or to, not, spend time chit chatting with other employees in the hallways because I had to show that I was productive. Well, now that's no longer the case. Talent wants to be able to be excited about the fact that they have a vacation coming up, and share stories about that vacation and engage with other employees. Companies like Facebook, they even removed 20% of work time. And instead, they want employees to spend that time hanging out together instead of working, because they realize that a work environment is so much more productive if people who are in it feel at home, feel like they're part of a group, of a community, and can spend time also, doing things other than working. So again, these are all food for thoughts, and we could talk about this for hours. But the recognition and respect for employees, that is so important, and that is something that every company can communicate, even an investment bank, even a company like auditing, where, when the season comes, there's very little work-life balance from simply a kind of flex time perspective, or, less working hour perspective, but you can still promote respect for employees and recognition. And then you can see, however, as I mentioned before, that many, different markets define work-life balance differently. So let's look at China and Singapore as an example. You can see that here, aligning a career with personal interests still come up on top for Singapore and for China. Well, that was not so much the case for more emerging markets that we've just seen. So again, even the concept of work-life balance changes. And the good thing here is that for those of you who recruit in emerging markets, you have a unique opportunity to change the two students' mind frames, right? The reality is that students don't know what they want until they know they can have it. Before Google, we surveyed hundreds of thousands of students around the world, and nobody said in the open text in our survey, I want to be able to bring my pet to work. Nobody said that. Why? Because they really didn't conceive of it. They never thought they could have that. They didn't even think about it. And then Google came, and all of a sudden, it became a top, everybody started writing that they wanted to take their pet to work. Imagine being a company and going on campus in Vietnam and saying, in an effort to promote work-life balance, I will offer 3-day weekends. I am pretty sure that next year, if I ask students in Vietnam what they want from a company, they will probably say 3-day weekend. Today, not a single one says that. Why? Because they don't think they can have that. So again, this is just a stretched example, but it does show how important it is that you look inside your organization and communicate all those things that you never communicated in the past, and that perhaps students are not used to hearing, because you can really kind of leverage the halo effect, the Google effect, and position yourself as a strong company and own some of these kind of new approaches, new characteristics, new offerings. And then looking again into career goals, they differ a lot between emerging markets, especially within APAC. Again, I hate talking about APAC and generalizing it as a region. So let's look at each individual country. As you can see here, you can see very clearly that students in emerging markets are much more keen on international careers than the APAC average, for example. You can see the dark red is the APAC average, and then you can see each tab shows a different market. So if you look at international career, only 30% on average in APAC want to have an international career, while if you look, for example, at India or Indonesia or even Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, they're all above average. And the reason for that is that these individuals, I mean, they understand how important Asia is today, and that they can really, really have a chance at the perfect career and contribution to the growth of the market if they build the right skills. So these are all individuals that want to, go abroad, learn those skills of leadership, creative thinking, out of box thinking, learn to be more assertive, more culturally agile, and then, contribute, come back and bring those back into the career market. This is not only in terms of going back for university, but also leaving for careers abroad. But ultimately, the interest is always to come back. And I think this is something that companies need to think about as, of course, global recruitment becomes a key source of competitive advantage for companies going forward. But you can see as well, for example, that having work-life balance, as we saw already, is much more important in Malaysia than it is in Thailand for now. I can promise you this is going to change over the next year or two, as Thailand also kind of gets exposed more and more to employers with strong employer brands. When it comes to security or stability in the job, you can see that that is more important in Thailand than it is in a market like Indonesia, for example, where perhaps it's taken for granted. Also, the concept of autonomy and independence, that is so important in Thailand. Look how high that is compared to any other market, both APAC average as well as other emerging markets. And also being dedicated to a cause or feel they're serving a greater good on the far right. This is so important in Vietnam. In Vietnam, students really want to work for a company where they feel they can contribute. Companies like Vinamilk, like Unilever, that really communicate this sense of higher purpose, in fact, are the top employers in Vietnam for that specific reason. And of course, many others as well. But that is, of course, a big part of it. And then if you look, you also the differences between engineering and IT. So previously I was showing you data for business students, and now let's look at engineering and IT. You can see that career goals also differ between fields of study. Of course, not to the extent that they differ in terms of country, but even in terms of fields of study. I work with so many banks, for example, that are struggling, or even professional services firms that are struggling to recruit IT talent. And I've been talking with, networks or companies that actually provide networks of programmers who say, whenever banks or professional services firms or companies in general leverage our platform to try to recruit IT students, it just doesn't work. They don't seem to be able to fill their hires. And the reason for that is that IT students speak a complete different language. So communicating to them in a very similar way as you would communicate to business talent, if you're a bank and business talent, for example, is your core target group, is not going to work. They are going to need a very localized EVP. You're going to need to understand exactly how IT students consume information, what they're really looking for in their future career, the real contribution they want to make. They want to understand exactly what kind of role they would have. Make sure they're not just going to be, back office, but they're going to be contributing to something bigger. You need to speak a language that they can speak. You need to communicate to them in a way that they understand. And this is something that companies really struggle, because normally, they would just kind of update the same type of material or offerings or communication that they go out to target their core target group and expect IT talent or engineering talent to react to it. The reality, again, remember, localization is not just geographical, but it's very much functional as well. So this is something, of course, we can talk more about, and we're happy to support you with. But it's important to look at career goals and preferences, and also how, for example, IT students perceive you as opposed to how business students perceive you, for example, or professionals, if you're talking about professional talent. And then, of course, millennials in APAC, as I mentioned earlier, are some of the most optimistic of any region. I was just in Hong Kong last week presenting at Super Return Asia, a private equity conference, talking specifically about how millennials are actually changing investment patterns, how they're changing their attitude towards money, how they're changing the way that private equity and venture capital companies work with this generation. Because what the reality is that millennials across the region, across the world, actually are not very optimistic. They expect to have a smaller standard of living compared to their parents, because of course they have seen the recession. However, despite living through some instability, you can see that Asia millennials tend to be among the most optimistic about the future. In fact, when we ask over their lifetime if they believe they will enjoy a higher standard of living than their parents, you can see that in Asia, 76% of them agree, as opposed to, for example, only 51% in Western Europe. And also, millennials in APAC feel that they'll be able to retire at a much younger age than their international peers. So you can actually see here that in Asia Pacific, talent is expecting to retire, at a much earlier age than, for example, in Europe, where very often is between 66 and above. No wonder then that Asia Pacific is a high focus region for foreign corporation, and it's increasing fast. This, of course, increases the need for local talent. If you just look at here, the direct investment into Asia Pacific in 2014, you can see that it's been huge. The capital investment in billions of US dollars has been tremendous. In Vietnam, 24 billion, India, 23 billion, Thailand, 8 billion. So basically, there's a 91 billion foreign corporation investment into these 5 countries in 2014 alone. And this number is actually increasing since 2013, 119% in Vietnam, for example. So, of course, these corporations are putting a lot of pressure on the talent market, which, of course, requires for HR to be a lot more strategic than ever before. And then, of course, in APAC, environmental factors are more important than a good reputation or market success. And as I mentioned earlier, in many cases, this is causing a shift in preferences from international to domestic companies. Let's look at banks as employers in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, where this is clearly illustrated. You can see very clearly that while in the past, foreign banks, for example, used to be the most attractive. A career with a bank was extremely attractive, extremely prestigious. You would make your parents proud. You would make a lot of money. It didn't matter that you would have to work incredibly hard. They were on top. This has changed. I remember in China when I started working with Universum in 2005, 2006, almost all of the companies that were the most attractive to students in the top 10 were foreign corporations. Today, they're almost entirely domestic banks and domestic companies, including government and nonprofits. So if you see here in Indonesia, you can see that the local banks are much more attractive to talent than foreign banks. Same for Malaysia, same for Vietnam. And why is it the case? The case, of course, as that these companies, domestic banks, domestic companies in particular, are associated with different things. In Indonesia, for example, domestic banks are associated much more strongly with competitive base salary, which is interesting. But they're also associated very strongly with good reference for future career, with secure employment. You can see that international banks are not associated with secure employment. In Malaysia, again, it's much more about, for example, friendly working environments. You can see that international banks are not associated with friendly working environment, and actually friendly working environment is the number one most attractive attribute of the ideal company out of 40 possible attributes almost globally. Number one in Hong Kong, number one in Singapore, and number one in Malaysia, and growing across the different markets. In Vietnam, you can see that domestic banks are associated, for example, with a high level of responsibility. This is something that is very important to Vietnamese talent. And some of the other associations are very, very similar. So we do see that students are quite, it's quite consistent with the attributes that, or the characteristics that a job in banking can offer. But where most employers actually differ in terms of domestic versus international bank is, as you saw, friendly working environment. Number one in Indonesia, number one in Malaysia, number one in Vietnam is secure employment, flexible working conditions. They're associated with it much more than multinational companies. In Vietnam, this is environmental sustainability. And remember how I said in Vietnam, being dedicated to a cause, serve the greater good is very important. And number three, corporate social responsibility, which is also extremely important in Indonesia, and friendly working environment for Vietnam. So in general, domestic players are associated with a better working environment, with more flexibility, and also with the ability to contribute to a higher purpose. This is not the case for international companies. Those from emerging markets are among the most keen in having an international career, as I mentioned, although they're also the most likely to return home. So I'm not going to focus on this too much, but you can see that those from emerging markets are much more keen to go abroad than developed markets in Asia. So you can see that Malaysia, Vietnam, India, Indonesia, students here are much more likely to pursue an international career. But as I said, they're also the more likely to return back to the home market. In fact, as you can see here, you can see that when we ask these individuals whether they would like to return to their home market, the vast majority of students in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, even China, they actually say yes. And this is interesting because companies often feel that's not the case. And that is because, the way in which they recruit these individuals abroad is primarily leveraging, the foreign market recruitment activities. So if you're trying to recruit Thai students, Chinese students in the US, you're counting on your kind of US recruitment team to bring those students on board, but that is not feasible. Chinese students, Asian students are scattered across these markets. Sometimes if you look at each universities, they're in the single digits. The interest of those, who fit your criteria and want to come back to their home market, those numbers may even be smaller. So it's much more important to kind of identify them and engage with them separately. And here actually we support companies quite extensively, and we recently launched a website called Kaigui specifically for companies who want to recruit Chinese talents abroad and bring them back, a place for these organizations to promote themselves, to talk about their environment, their return value proposition, etc. So again, this is a group that requires a very different kind of approach, but the reality is, and the data shows it clearly, these people are interested in coming back. They are. You just need to be able to reach them more effectively. And finally, social media is highly important in APAC, both on a personal and professional level, but talent, of course, also still craves the face-to-face. So as an organization, you still need to be on campus. There's no better way for you to be able to really show how your people are, how friendly they are, but then also social media that you can use to tell stories, to showcase existing employees, and where you can really reach out to students above all the noise on campus, above all the competition. You can see that students in emerging markets spend more time on social media than students in any other market. Look at Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia. I mean, these are among the countries where students spend the most time on social media. And way more than half of them, in some cases 70, 80, 90% of them, actually use social media as a way to learn about companies. So imagine being a student and imagine waking up in the morning and going on your news feed on Facebook, where you go to learn about what's going on and what's new and what's interesting, and finding a really cool story of someone within your organization who is having a great experience. They're very likely to read that content. They're very likely to engage with it, especially if the story that you're telling is aligned with what these students are looking to hear, right? So this is a unique opportunity for you to kind of position yourself, and then the second these students like that message and engage with it, their entire network will get to see that story in their newsfeed. And that is how companies are building their social media presence. So why should you focus on social media? Oh gosh, I could talk about this for days, but of course it's highly relevant. It gives you the opportunity to decide actively who you want to engage. When you go on campus, you can only rely on the fact that the students that you are hoping will be there. But the reality is that, if you are a fast-moving consumer good company, throwing an event on campus in some markets, I mean, you're likely to get mostly business or marketing students show up. Why? Because engineering students don't really understand in many cases that there's opportunities for them within certain industries. Social media allows you to literally proactively identify who it is that you want to reach out to, whether these people know they want you or not. Knock on their door, craft a message that is extremely targeted to them, and get them by the hand and bring them back to whether it's your event or your career site. So it gives you the opportunity to decide. Imagine having a virtual room that's empty and being able to actually decide exactly who you want to be in that room. And these are people that maybe don't even know they want to join you yet. But the second that you actually get to them and get them by the hand and share your experience in a localized way, they're actually 75% likely to convert interest. and go from, oh, I was never considering a career in FMCG to I would love a career in FMCG. I just didn't know enough about it. So of course you can be highly relevant. It's extremely cost effective. You can measure the success immediately. I mean, you can immediately see how much engagement a story had. You can immediately measure within minutes, how many people are actually clicking on your website or applying to your opportunity or registering to your event as a result of a post or a story. So just to summarize, again, remember, Asia is a key source of future talent globally. The competition will only get stronger. Local organizations as well, they're stepping up to the plate. I mean, up to a few years ago, we hardly worked with any Singaporean local companies. And today we're working with the government, with the ministries, with local organizations. They're all stepping up. They're starting to promote their EVPs, build their employer brands, very much like multinationals have. So they're already attractive, more attractive in some cases than multinationals, and they don't even have a clear EV strategy. And now they're actually starting to build one. So competition will become tougher and tougher. There is a large pool of young talents in APAC. The pool is very diverse, so you need to think locally. Work-life balance is very important and will keep growing. How is it true to your organization? How can you communicate it? Millennials are very optimistic. They're expecting a lot. They have very aggressive and optimistic career goals. How is your organization going to help them get there? Environmental and employment factors are more important than money. Are you talking about your people and culture? Do you know what your strengths are? And are you communicating them effectively? And then finally, are you using social media in the right way? And we've had plenty of webinars on this space as well. And as you know, we support companies with literally building their voice on social media. So we're happy to share some more findings or case studies specific to how companies are doing in your market, because that is the competition you will be facing going forward. So I'm happy to share some case studies with you. And finally, one more thing I wanted to close with. As I mentioned, because of all this pressure on the talent markets, companies now have a need for local HR teams to become much more strategic in the way they work with talent and much less operational. And for years, we've been supporting HR teams in becoming more strategic, but because of the need, companies started to ask us to actually, and this through many years ago, to develop a training course that would allow HR professionals to actually certify themselves and become employer branding professionals themselves. So a couple of years ago, we launched the Employer Branding Academy globally. It's a fantastic training program that will give you certification and make you an employer branding professional. We run it in your markets, and we run it online, and it's really great. Just the key highlights about that. You can become a key expert in strategic planning. So it focuses on helping you build all the theory and framework needed to be strategic with employer branding. It also gives you the tools and knowledge to be able to develop professionally in your career. So practical skills and tools really needed to execute, communicate, and measure your employer brand. It broadens horizons. So it helps you get a really big understanding into latest insights in local and global trends, understanding what's happening in your local market, regional, and global markets as well. And then also, it is the only globally recognized certification that shows that you are an employer branding professional. So it does provide a certification. You will get a certificate which is highly recognized. In Singapore, you can even apply for the government to refund the cost of the training. So whether this is for yourself, if you would like to certify yourself as an employer branding professional, or for members of your team, this is really fantastic, and we are happy to share, case studies of companies that have partaken or taken this course and shared rave reviews. We have those on video. It's the top and largest organizations in the world. So if you're interested, of course, you will also join an exclusive alumni of certified employer branding professionals, as you will be working with them and many, many bright people throughout the program. So just to give you an idea of the course timeline, and then this is the last slide, there will be a day one kickoff day in your chosen city or via the online webinar. Then in the four weeks, there will be an e-learning module, 1 and 2. So 2 learning modules. One will be on why employer branding, and the second one will be on supporting companies in building a strategy. Week 4, there will be webinar with guest speakers. These are top employer branding experts globally. And from week 5 to 8, there will be more e-learning modules, 3 and 4. Module 3 will be on how to communicate. and module 4 on how to measure your results. And then finally, on week 8, there is a certification day, which you can participate in person or via online webinar. So just to give you an idea of the courses that are kicking off this October in APAC, we have these all over the world, in Latin America, in Europe, everywhere in EMEA. But in Singapore, the in-person will kick off on the 19th of October, in Sydney, the 21st of October, in Hong Kong on the 23rd, and in Shanghai on the 26th. And for those who are in Vietnam or can't be there for the kickoff in person in any of these cities, we have the online kickoffs on the 14th and 15th of October. So if you're interested in this, it's a really fantastic certification. It really helps build kind of that strategic mind frame that I think is very much needed in today's market, with today's war for talent. And you can find more information on employerbrandingacademy.com, or of course you can email me or Mike or any of us, and we will be happy to share more information on this. So with this, I am wrapping up our webinar for today. I hope you found this information helpful. As you know, the webinar was recorded, so we will be making it available for you to share with your teams, or for those of you that couldn't be there. If you have any questions, for the sake of time, please send them in the chat, and we will respond to them and get back to you one-on-one. And of course, as you know, I'm always happy to work with any of you, to talk to you, to brainstorm any needs you may have, anything you may want to just get some input on. I am happy to schedule a time to chat. I wish all of you a fantastic rest of the week, and hope to have a chance to see you in person again soon. And have a good day.